They didn't get lazy, they didn't lose passion, they didn't suddenly forget how to run a business. But this year, across towns and cities in America, thousands of small business owners are walking away, not with a bang, but with exhaustion. The neighborhood bakery that once smelled like fresh hope, closed. The repair shop that fixed 3 generations of cars, empty lot. Even long-standing restaurants with loyal customers are putting up final signs. Thank you for everything. We tried. This isn't bad luck. This is a systemic unraveling, driven by rising input costs, unforgiving interest rates, and customers who simply can't afford to spend anymore. Behind every closure is not just a business, but a life plan collapsing. So why is this wave of bankruptcies hitting now? And what does it say about the American economy when survival, not success, becomes the only goal? Let's talk about it. The signs are showing up everywhere, in windows, on doors, in Facebook goodbye posts. After 22 years, we're closing. To our amazing customers, we gave it our all. Thank you for the memories. We wish things were different. From coast to coast, small businesses, the beating heart of local American life, are shutting down at an alarming pace. According to data from the American Bankruptcy Institute, Chapter 11 filings among small and mid-sized firms surged by 38% in the second quarter of 2025 compared to the same period last year. It's not just numbers on a spreadsheet, it's visible. It's happening in strip malls, corner shops, and main streets. In Phoenix, over 120 businesses filed for bankruptcy in May alone, more than any month in the past 5 years. Minneapolis saw a 42% rise in closures of service-based businesses. In Las Vegas, the city that once never slept, dozens of long-running family restaurants have gone dark, not for renovations, but for good. These aren't pandemic-era closings. These are post-recovery collapses, in a time when the economy is supposedly growing again. That's what makes this moment so painful, so confusing. For years, small business owners weathered the pandemic, lockdowns, and the supply chain chaos of 2020 and 2021. They adapted, moved online, cut hours, offered curbside pickup, pivoted hard. And yet now, in 2025, after surviving all that, they're falling one by one. It's happening in towns like Toledo, Ohio, where a third-generation printing company quietly filed for bankruptcy in June after 71 years in business. The owner, 59-year-old Tony Delgado, said, "We survived the dot-com bust, 2008, COVID, but we couldn't survive this." What's this? It's a perfect storm. Prices for materials and supplies keep rising. Borrowing has become painfully expensive, and customers, regular working Americans, are spending less than they used to. It's a daily squeeze, a slow bleed, and for many it's now unsustainable. Even in New York City, where hustle is a way of life, storefront vacancies are climbing again. On the Lower East Side, a popular vegan cafe with a cult following shut down last month. They left a simple note on the door: "We love you, we just can't afford to stay." And in Oregon, a handmade jewelry shop that once thrived on Etsy orders and in-person festivals closed its doors. The owner, Lisa, wrote on social media, "I've been pushing, hustling, selling for 11 years, but the math doesn't work anymore. Rent's up, shipping's up, customers hesitate. I'm exhausted." Across the board, it's not about bad business ideas or poor execution. It's about a financial environment that has turned hostile, even to businesses that were once thriving, and the pain is spreading. In many communities, each closed business means lost jobs, lost foot traffic, and a loss of identity. Main streets that were once vibrant now feel like ghost towns in the making. What's happening isn't just economic, it's emotional. It's the slow disappearance of stability, the unraveling of hard work. And for millions of Americans who believed in the power of small business, it's starting to feel like the American dream has a shutdown date. So what's driving this collapse? Why are thousands of small businesses, many with loyal customers, years of experience and deep community roots, suddenly unable to stay afloat? It comes down to 3 converging forces: rising input costs, crippling interest rates, and consumer pullback. Each one alone is difficult. Together, they're deadly. Let's start with the basics. What it takes to run a business in 2025 is far more expensive than it was even 2 years ago. The Producer Price Index, a measure of input costs for businesses, has jumped more than 22% since pre-pandemic levels, according to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. The costs of raw materials, from lumber and steel to packaging and flour, have all increased, and those increases haven't come down, even as inflation at the consumer level has cooled. For example, a bakery in Texas reported that a 50-pound bag of flour now costs $32, up from $18 in 2020. A landscaping company in Florida said that fertilizer and gas costs alone have eaten 60% of its profits this spring. On top of that, commercial rent is rising again, especially in urban areas. In cities like San Francisco, Austin, and Miami, commercial lease rates have climbed 8 to 12% year over year. For small business owners operating on razor-thin margins, that's a deal breaker. Add in higher utility bills, insurance premiums, and compliance costs, and suddenly, staying open becomes a monthly miracle. When the Federal Reserve began raising interest rates in 2022 to fight inflation, the ripple effects were clear. Mortgages, car loans, and credit cards got more expensive. But what hit small businesses hardest was something that got less attention: the cost of short-term commercial credit. According to the National Federation of Independent Business, NFIB, over 60% of small firms rely on credit lines or term loans to manage inventory, payroll, or seasonal cash flow. In 2021, many of those loans had rates around 4 to 5%. Today, they're closer to 10 to 13%, a brutal shift. Many businesses refinanced during the low-rate era, but those loans are now coming due. And as they try to roll over or renew, they're faced with monthly payments that have doubled or tripled. One Denver-based cafe owner put it this way: "We borrowed $80,000 to survive the pandemic. Now we're paying $1,900 a month in interest. We're not growing, we're just paying to breathe." This dynamic has turned debt from a lifeline into a slow noose. The third, and perhaps most invisible factor, consumer hesitation. Even though inflation is technically cooling, the damage to household budgets is already done. Real wages, adjusted for inflation, have barely moved. According to a May 2025 survey by Bankrate, nearly 61% of Americans say they're cutting back on dining out, retail shopping, and non-essential services. Families are making harder choices. Do we eat out this weekend or put that money toward groceries and gas? Do we renew that gym membership or cancel it and walk in the park? For small businesses, this behavioral shift shows up in 1,000 small ways. Fewer tips for service workers. Customers downgrading from full price to sale items. Cancelled appointments, delayed home projects, fewer holiday orders. Even loyal customers are pulling back. Not because they don't care, but because they can't afford to care. And when spending habits tighten across the board, small businesses, which lack the scale and cash reserves of national chains, are the first to feel it. The brutal truth is, small business owners aren't failing because they're making bad decisions. They're failing because the math no longer works. It's a structural problem, a cost pressure problem, a demand-side problem. And most of all, it's a reminder that in today's economy, resilience has its limits. This wave of small business bankruptcies isn't hitting Wall Street, it's hitting Main Street. And it's hitting hardest in the places and among the people who've long depended on small enterprises to hold the local economy together. The most vulnerable are the smallest operators. Family-run diners, single-chair salons, dry cleaners, hardware stores, craft vendors, repair shops, tutoring centers, the kinds of businesses that don't have legal teams, CFOs, or venture capital. Many of them are operated by one or two people, often immigrants, often women, often people who invested their life savings into something they believed could last. Across the Midwest, suburban towns are losing core services that residents once took for granted. In Iowa and Missouri, reports show a growing number of small medical and dental practices quietly closing, unable to keep up with rising malpractice insurance and equipment leasing costs. In Southern California, Vietnamese-owned nail salons, once resilient through downturns, are shutting doors one after another, not for lack of customers, but because the cost of materials, rent, and compliance has overtaken their margins. In New England, the artisanal economy, bakeries, florists, indie bookstores, is shrinking. These were businesses that often thrived on local loyalty and word of mouth, but even loyal customers are tightening their wallets. $10 loaves of bread and $70 dinner tabs now feel like luxuries. That shift in perception from local gem to non-essential is devastating. The impact isn't just limited to business owners. Employees are being cut loose, sometimes with no warning. In towns like Spokane, Washington, or Mobile, Alabama, layoffs at local service businesses have quietly spiked, even as national unemployment numbers remain stable. These aren't mass layoffs that make headlines. They're ones that ripple through households quietly. A part-time waitress suddenly loses her Saturday shift. A mechanic sees hours cut from 40 to 24. A teenage worker at the ice cream stand doesn't get called back this summer. And there's a knock-on effect. When a local print shop closes, the school down the street has to order banners online. When the neighborhood bakery shuts down, the adjacent coffee shop loses morning foot traffic. A domino falls, and 3 more wobble. Empty storefronts don't just signal economic loss, they reshape the social fabric of communities. They change where people walk, how they gather, and what feels possible in a neighborhood. Minority-owned businesses are particularly exposed. A 2024 report by the Urban Institute found that Black and Latino-owned small businesses are twice as likely to rely on short-term, high-interest loans than their white-owned counterparts. Many of those loans are now defaulting. What began as a recovery story, minority entrepreneurship booming after COVID, is now quietly unraveling. In immigrant neighborhoods across Houston, Chicago, and Queens, the signs are changing. Where once there were hand-painted shop windows and vibrant ethnic markets, there are now more for-lease posters. In some areas, landlords are dividing up once thriving businesses into storage units just to generate revenue. Even business owners who haven't closed yet are holding their breath. Many say they're operating month to month. They're behind on rent. They've stopped paying themselves. They've drained their savings. They're working longer hours, cutting staff, and hoping something gives. But the truth is, for a growing number of them, it already has. This isn't just a wave of closures, it's a redistribution of who gets to participate in the American economy. And increasingly, it feels like the doors are closing hardest on those who believed in it the most. Tony Delgado never thought he'd lock the doors to his print shop for the last time. He inherited the business from his father, who opened it in 1954. Over the decades, they printed wedding invitations, funeral programs, church bulletins, the rhythm of local life. It wasn't just printing, he said. We were part of this town's history. But history doesn't pay the rent anymore. Tony filed for bankruptcy in early June. His last 6 months were spent juggling credit card balances, delaying supply payments, and skipping his own paycheck. He says the hardest part wasn't losing the business. It was telling his 2 employees, both of whom had been with him for over a decade, that they no longer had jobs. Lisa Nguyen ran a small nail salon in Orange County. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid her mortgage, supported her mother, and gave her kids a shot at college. She did everything right, offered discounts, changed suppliers, even cut back her own hours to save on payroll. But the math wouldn't budge. I'd look at the weekly total and cry, she said. We worked all day, every day, but after supplies and rent and taxes, we had $50 left for the week. Lisa's landlord raised her rent by 12% in January. Her supplier increased prices for polish and gloves by 18%. At the same time, her regular customers, many of them nurses and teachers, started spacing out their appointments. Some stopped coming entirely. They would tell me, "I'm so sorry, I love you, but I just can't afford it anymore." What do you say to that? She closed the shop in May, boxed up her tools, and started applying for hourly retail jobs. She now works at a pharmacy chain, earning $16 an hour. In Chicago, Ahmed runs a small Mediterranean restaurant with his wife. Or rather, he ran it. Business was steady until last winter, when utility bills spiked and a food supplier suddenly shut down. He had to find new vendors at higher prices, and his cash flow never recovered. We were doing everything by hand. We worked 80 hours a week. It still wasn't enough. I used to think effort was the answer. Now I think it's timing. Ahmed tried to refinance his business loan. The bank said no. His credit score had dropped too low from missed payments. We closed on a Monday. The same day, my son asked if we were still going to Disneyland this summer. I didn't know what to say. Even those who are still open speak in the language of fear. Maria, a florist in upstate New York, says she doesn't sleep on Sundays. That's when she does the books. I sit at the kitchen table with receipts and pray that I don't see red. Every week, it feels like I'm gambling, and I'm not a gambler. She hasn't paid herself in 2 months. She's behind on rent, behind on taxes, behind on sleep. What I do is beautiful, but beauty isn't paying the bills right now. These stories repeat themselves from state to state, from trade to trade. And what unites them isn't just financial stress, it's emotional fatigue. It's the look in someone's eyes when they've run out of levers to pull. It's the ache of realizing that hard work isn't a guarantee anymore, that you can do everything right and still lose. And it's the quiet grief of letting go of something you built day by day with your own hands. There's no dramatic crash, no scandal, just a slow fade, a final receipt, a key turned in a lock. And for every one of these voices we hear, there are thousands we don't. There's no press conference for these closures, no front page headlines, no bailouts, just silence. A silence that grows with every shuttered storefront, every locked gate, every goodbye post that vanishes into the algorithm. What we're witnessing isn't just a wave of bankruptcies, it's a shift in the very structure of the American economy. Quiet, slow, but real. The kind that doesn't announce itself with fireworks, but with fatigue. A kind of economic erosion that wears people down, not all at once, but over time. For decades, we've told ourselves that small businesses are the backbone of the American dream, the proof that anyone with enough grit, passion, and late nights could make it. But in 2025, that dream feels increasingly fragile. The numbers don't lie, and neither do the empty shops on Main Street. What does it mean when survival becomes the full-time goal? When profit is no longer the measure of success, just staying open is? And when the people most committed to their communities are the ones being priced out of them? There is no neat ending here. No policy headline tomorrow that will reverse what's already happened for thousands. These businesses won't reopen. The keys have already been handed in. But maybe the deeper question is this. If the economy is doing well but the people inside it are quietly giving up, then what exactly is doing well? And for whom? Until we reckon with that, the silence will continue. Block by block. Shop by shop. Life by life. Thank you for listening. If today's story felt close to home, if you've walked past an empty storefront recently or know someone who had to give up the business they poured their life into, you're not alone. This isn't just an economic moment, it's a human one. At this podcast, we don't offer easy answers, but we do believe in asking the hard questions, the kind that sit with you long after the headlines fade. If this episode moved you, consider sharing it with someone who needs to hear it, or leave us a review. It helps others find the show, and it keeps these conversations alive. We'll be back next week with more stories from the heart of the American economy, the real one, where people are doing their best to hold on. Until then, take care of yourselves, and take care of each other.